Good morning. This is the webinar on evaluation in Extension, and we're going to be profiling the UW survey tool. As you know, my name is Cole Emke. I'm a specialist in ag entrepreneurship and personal finance. I'm with 100% of my time with Extension, but I'm based in the Department of Agricultural and Applied Economics. And what we'll do today is walk through the UW survey tool and talk a little bit about evaluation as we move along. And I should say from the first that evaluation is not a new idea. It's been around a very long time. In fact, the Chinese had a large evaluation system in place for their civil servants as long ago as 2000 BC. And so in addition to its long history, evaluation has lots of different definitions. Many times we often think of it as synonymous with tests or descriptions or documents or even management if you're in a personnel setting when you're evaluating an employee. Now, from the perspective that we're going to approach it today, we're going to be looking at our students improving or can we get information from our clientele in an easier way? And so what's an extension application? But generally, the definition of evaluation is that it's a systematic investigation of the worth or merit of an object. So an educational program, definitely. So as we move along, I wanted to walk a little bit through, just briefly through the 6 phases of the evaluation process. And then we'll see how the UW survey tool, an electronic information gathering system that's online, might be able to fit into the evaluation process. There's 6 phases that are important to providing useful information. And of course we have to decide what information is important to gather. For this model when we often work with our educational programs, we use the logic model. We think in terms of inputs, outputs, and outcomes. Who's going to be involved in the project and what we're going to be getting out of the project. But evaluation is essentially the collection of data. So we, at the first step, need to decide for ourselves how are we going to model the program, usually the logic model, and then what points in there are we going to be able to have evaluation, or what do we want to be able to evaluate? The second step is to make sure that we ask questions that help us fill in those blanks and be very clear about what those steps are that we want to see people achieving. You guys in nutrition and food safety, you're well in tune with this, but not everyone is. And especially when we go to design a new program, evaluation tends to be one of those things that we tend to do last. It happens that my wife is working on an application for a grant, and it's a fairly sizable grant, and it says specifically in the RFP for the grant that you have to allocate money for evaluation, and it's typically around 15% of the grant funds. And so in her case, like a $750,000 grant would be almost $100,000, more than $100,000 worth of money spent on evaluating whether the program was useful. And in their case, it has to be a third-party evaluation. They can't do all of the evaluation themselves. So when we think in terms of like grant applications and the money that we're spending on a project, if we allocate even 5 or a remarkable amount of like 10% to it in many extension educational programs, then I think that would help us do a better job of evaluation. Because I suspect I'm like you in that I think that in extension we collect the basics, and not much more. We collect how many people we contacted, and we try to track as well as we can the behaviors that we changed. And perhaps your perspective is different, but those things are the very basics. We need to go beyond that. And so when we think about allocating, if we were to allocate 5% of the value of a project to evaluation, that would really help us change our perspective of saying, yes, evaluation is important, and we really need to spend a lot of time gathering important information so that we can share with our stakeholders and the public, let alone the people who fund us, that we're doing really good programs. And that'll help us do better programs in the future because we're getting information from our customers about what they're interested in. We move on to the third step, developing an evaluation design. What are the questions, and how are we going to get those questions to the people and get the information back in a way that gets us a pretty high response rate? Eventually collect the data. Could be the simplest part in some respects, because we've done all the hard thinking up in advance. We just need to get it to people and have them give it back. Analyzing the data. In many cases, our program data is we don't have a lot of analyzing to do. But if we wanted to add some rigor to our questions and actually test some hypotheses, then we sure could. But analyzing it, we need to do some thinking about what we did about the project at some point, and that's reading through everything and doing some assessment. And then, of course, part of evaluation that I think we sometimes fall down on is providing the information to interested audiences. I suspect I'm not untypical in this, in that I collect the information, I look at the evaluations, which is a brief analysis, and then I don't really get back to all of the partners that we had and share with them the results. And that's an important part to the health of our organization and staying connected with our communities. Now, the UW survey tool, as you may know, is an online survey. If you've taken a SurveyMonkey survey or something like that, if you've evaluated a product online, then that would be the very same sort of thing if you've not seen it before. And it would be helpful, certainly most helpful, in the collection of data. That's what it's designed for. It can also do some brief analysis. And with those analyses, we can get some information, perhaps in bar charts or numbers, certainly tables, that we can send to our audiences. So this can help with stages 4, 5, and 6. But it's also helpful when we go to set up our evaluation within the UW survey tool. It gives us all of the options about the kind of questions that we can ask. And if we don't have a clear idea very up front about what we want to ask, then all of the options can help us in this second level of thinking about the questions, and the fourth one, getting them into a design that flows well, help us think through something that provides us good information and is easy to use on the back end with our customers. Those are the 6 steps of the evaluatory process. And I think they're helpful to keep in mind, especially as the UW survey tool can help us with those. Now let's move right into the survey tool. And if you've not seen it before, this is the page that it looks like. So you'll want to make a note of this URL here, survey.uwyo.edu. Now, if you've given this sort of URL to the public, then they would go here and they might enter their survey ID. In many cases, you can just send a unique URL to people, and it will bypass this altogether. Now, because we are going to be designing surveys, we will want to log into the application, so we'll click the little Here button that's highlighted in blue. Now, I should say that although we all have UW usernames and passwords, we're not all authorized to use the UW survey tool. So you will want to email down here to the userhelp@uwyo.edu URL and get authorized to use the system. Now, if I don't mention it later, let me just say over here, I've typed in the chat box, that probably the best web browser to use to edit the surveys is Firefox. That's what the UW survey people use to recommend that we use. It's a little more stable platform, and I've compared Internet Explorer and Firefox, and I can say that while I've had trouble with Internet Explorer, Firefox has been flawless, nice and easy. So when you remember this URL, make sure that you also remember to type it into Firefox. Now, once you're authorized to use the UW survey tool, what you do is you'll click on the Here button, and then you'll go into this. You'll see these 3 lines. Username and password, of course, easy. Now there's a blank domain name. You'll need to type in the letters UWYO. It won't include those for you. It's not an option that is it's like in a pull-down menu, so you'll have to remember it. And then click Submit, and that will get you right into the system. Now, when you get into the system, here's what the main menu, the main area will look like. As you can see, I've got a number of surveys that I'm working with, and then we can either create a new one, or we can edit an old one, or we can take a look at the results that we've collected. We can analyze the data. We can do a number of things. So let's walk through the options that we've got, and I've got an example that I'm going to work through. Later this summer, I'm going to be hosting a tour of farms in the Laramie area, the Laramie Valley. And it's very similar to tours that I've done in the past. So what I'm going to do is probably collect the very same sort of information. And so let me look at the Tour de Coupe 2011. So I'm going to click on, not the highlighted name, I should say. You'll go over here to these options over here on the right-hand side. Design, Options, Deploy, Analyze, Archive, Delete, and Clear. The one that you will use most is the paintbrush there, the design. So I'm clicking on Design, and I'm opening that up, and it clicks to modify the survey. From here, I can edit the content of the survey, the number and the text of questions, the introductory lines or the welcome, the order of the questions, the number of pages that the survey is on, and so on. And as you can see here, the Edit button tells me what I can edit. I can change the title. I can edit the questions. I can edit question number 1. I can edit number 2. I can move the question. I can move it up or down. You can see the arrows over here on the left-hand side. And I can push question number 1 down to number 2, or I can push number 2 down to number 3. So I can rearrange these in a pretty straightforward way. The system is graphical. It's pretty easy to use, and it's pretty straightforward. So let me show you what this survey would look like if I sent the URL to someone. So you saw that I had a couple of questions. If I sent the URL, they'd get this sort of a page. It would open up in a web page of its own, and then people would just type into the comments box here on questions 1, 2, and 3, and then for number 4, I've got a little radio button thing that they'll tick the one that they want. As you can see, this presentation here that I've got for this survey is just black and white, just very straightforward. No graphics, no colors. No design elements to add anything special to it. You, of course, can tailor and make a more colorful approach. I tend to like just a very simple, straightforward approach, and haven't even done anything with backgrounds or anything like that, which I tend to think you have to be careful of just because of readability and on the web, and sometimes adding graphics can be a problem. Now, adding the UW extension logo would be an obvious thing, but if you don't want to do that, you sure don't have to. This is pretty straightforward survey. This is a pretty straightforward survey. So now, let's go back to the main menu. That would be here, and I will click on Create a New Survey, because there's a number of ways I can create a new survey. Take a look at these things over here. Manage Folders is probably not a button you'll use very much. Create a new survey is something you probably will use, and Response Logic is something that I don't think is all that helpful, or at least I've not found a use for it, so I'm not going to walk through it. So we'll create a new survey. I'll click on that. It opens a new page here. And as you can see, it asks for a title. There's a little asterisk, meaning that you absolutely have to put a title in there. And then look here, it gives you two options. It tells you that you can create one from scratch or one from an existing survey. Now, if you do create one from scratch, then that means you absolutely have to create everything, the background, the title, the colors. You have to build all the questions one at a time. It's a little more intensive. Since the survey I'm going to use is similar to the one that I want to use, that I've used in the past, I'm just going to create from an existing survey. Now you should note that the default button is from scratch, the little radio button there. I've clicked on from existing, and then there's a pull-down menu that mimics all of those surveys that are in my main menu, and I'm going to go down here to the Tour de Coupe 2011, and because that's the one that's going to be most like the one that I'm going to use for the producer's tour. So I've got that. I've opened this survey now, and let me walk you through what we'll see here. There's a number of buttons over here on the right-hand side. Insert a question. Edit, which is edit a question. Delete, which is delete the question. Copy the question, which creates an exact copy of everything here. Move the question. You can move it up and down here, either on the menu or by the arrows over here on the left-hand side. So those are all pretty intuitive and straightforward. The one that may not be is the bottom one over here on the right of the menus of the question, which is pipe. Pipe allows you to take the results from that you collect in a question and use them later in a different question. So let's say if you had them type in where they're from. Let's say if you're from, and then they fill in the blank, let's say Centennial, then that would have been where I could have asked the question, where are you from? And they would have typed in Centennial. Then I could have hit pipe, and I could have that answer used later. And then I could use it in a question such as, would people from, then insert the answer, Centennial, like more information about whatever, and then I can have them answer a new question with another answer, with another comments box, or some other question it might be. That's what the essence of pipe is. You can gather information early and then use it later to make a little bit more personal tool. Now you can also edit the headings. So let's look at the three buttons in the line just above the questions, which is edit page properties, copy page, and delete page. I should say don't forget them. I'm not going to go into much depth because I think they're pretty straightforward as well. On this screen I've got, I want to show you what we do when we click one of the open-ended comment boxes and edit it. So it will give you a number of options as to how questions are set up. That's this pull-down menu here. Now for the one that we saw here, let me just move back a page. The first question was, if you attended the tour, what did you like about it? And then they can type as many words as they want in the open-ended comments box. So I've clicked edit on that, and here I can edit the title of the question, which there it is. Now it also gives me a couple of options. It gives me another little paragraph to add explanatory information if I wanted to. And then there's even another one. So it gives me several chances to add more information. I just want to ask the question. I don't need to have any explanation about what sort of answers I want or anything like that. So I usually skip those two things. When you make surveys, you can edit them for yourselves and see what it adds. Now, I probably will want to change this text a little bit, but for the moment, what I'll do is hit cancel down here at the bottom. You see cancel and save. Don't forget to hit either cancel or save. And when you hit save, it will refresh the page, and it will take you back to the main menu, so that you'll see that things are a little bit different. Now let me move a little bit forward in this survey, and you'll notice that question number 4 was not an open-ended comments box. It was a ratings question. So let me show you how that works. I'll edit that, and here it opens this kind of a page. As before, we've got our question up here on our top box. We can add in the other text that we would like to have in these other two boxes. And then it gives me quite a number of options for all associated with collecting the information in the survey. Validation, and then here you have the little tick the little box that says required, and then it's check this box if an answer to this question is required. If we absolutely want to have people answer this question, we want to have this answer more than any other answer, and they can't move on or they can't close the survey without hitting it, then we'll hit required. There's something related to random order, which is check this box if the answers to this question should be displayed in random order. I prefer to have I'm not doing anything scientific here. Random order is not important. I like to have a specific order of a certain flow, so I don't ever tick that. Now, the answer alignment, you can align the questions vertically or horizontally. Typically, just for my surveys, a vertical is enough, and you can put 5 answers per row. You can add that number in for yourself. There's a minimum number of responses. If you have a multiple choice question, maybe you want them to be able to answer 5 times or 1 time. For me, I just want 1 answer. And you don't even need to put anything in here as well. It just depends on the nature of your question. Now, this third section here, the answers section, is where you'll probably spend a little bit of time because you'll want to think for yourself in advance. Do you want to have a 5-layer question, 5 options? Do you want to have 6 options, an even number, so that there's not an undecided vote in the middle? I've gone with 5 for this time. But you could go 10, you could go 15, you could go 100, you could perhaps go to 100. Usually you don't need that much refinement, and it's probably easier to collect that sort of information in a different sort of a way rather than these little radio dials. So we've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I could insert new answer here to expand my list to 6 if I wanted. I would have to rejigger things a little bit. For instance, I would have to, if I added another line in here, an option of 6, then I would have to copy the text out of the line number 5 and move that to line number 6, because line number 5 wouldn't be very much worth the time. I wouldn't want to move that to number 6. So editing a question is pretty straightforward, even if it's a multiple choice question. Let me go back here and show you something that yes, Chris, sure, you could sure put in an undecided that's part of the scale, or even perhaps separate from the scale. Part of the scale certainly makes sense. So you could say number 1 is undecided, or then you could do the rest, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and just rate their scale. Or you could put it within the middle. If you have a continuum, maybe number 3 could be 3 parentheses undecided. Let me show you the options, though, for the answers. You see this pull-down menu here that says Select Answer Group, optional. I'll click on that, and what I get here is this range of options. And so they give you if you haven't thought about what words you want to use within that system, then this will suggest them. Agree, disagree is simple enough. Appropriate, inappropriate, above average, below average, easy, difficult, satisfied, dissatisfied. So it provides some suggestions for you to work with. So you're not just having to draw from your imagination or memory of another evaluation or whatever it may be. Provides some ideas to help you move along with the evaluation. Let me go back to the main menu here and we've clicked on Design. Now let's shift and click on the options for the survey. That will open up this page, and as you can see here, there's 6 tabs, and I'm just going to walk through each of the 6 tabs. The first one is General. The title you've already put in there. The status refers to whether people can respond to the survey. The survey is open. And another option is whether the survey it's closed. And if it's closed, then the URL is a blank one, and you just can't input any information. Of course, the language is English. Now, this third one here, owners with the asterisk, is an interesting one. I'm the owner, so my name is there by default. But you can also add other people who will have access to this survey if you want. For instance, Chris, I could put your username in there, and then you would have access to this survey. And you could edit this survey. You could see the results of this survey because you'd be considered an owner. And the same with this next line, the admin email. That's the person that, as it says here, that will be used as the from address for the administrator of the application. So if someone has a question about the survey, or if you use the survey's tools to send the survey, then it will look like it came from you. It shows you the date that you created the survey. And then these next 2 lines are interesting because by default, it will start the survey as of the day that you made it, and it will set as a date that the survey will close, the end date time, as about a month from that date that you started it. Now you can change those. You can change this so that the survey is open at a specific time, let's say in 10 days. You're not ready for people to go take a look at it yet, but you want to set it for the future, so you do. You can also change the end time. Let's say a month is not a long enough time. You're going to be collecting information from a community group or from a class that you gave over the course of 2 months or 3 months or 6 months. Or let's say you gave a class at one time, and you set up the evaluation at the time that you gave the class, but you want to collect information over the course of even, let's say, a year. You could move that end date out that far. Let's click from the General tab over to the Display tab, and you'll see here that I mentioned earlier that you can add colors and logos, and sometimes you can find just the right look that's already been created by someone else. And there are templates to use in the template area, and you can also change the look here in the display area a little bit. So you can preview the templates. You can preview the templates in the template area up here. Do you see at the very top in the green bar? Surveys is highlighted in blue, but there's also libraries and templates and email lists. Well, if you were to click on templates, that would show you the templates, and you could click on the templates and see how they look. Here is where you would, on the display page, on the display tab of the options page, that's where you would change the template. So you'd go over here to change, and the template I'm using is Angela, the very straightforward black and white one. You can click the preview button and see how it will look. You can add in whether you want to have the page numbers. You say you're on page 1 of 3 pages, and you see a little bar that helps you track that along. I often find that's helpful. Question numbering, the number of questions within the entire survey. So every page, if you were to have a multi-page survey, the numbering begins at the first page and continues all the way to the end, and there's not new numbering on every single page. There's also some navigation buttons here. You can close the browser when they hit the cancel button. It can take them to a different URL if you want, let's say the UWCES homepage or a sub-page within that or some other page. And then there's some buttons that are within the display, a back button, a save button, and a close button. You can also add in some other options, which for this survey, I didn't do anything like that. Let's go up here to the Access button up over on these tabs. This is the respondent level access. So a respondent, you've sent them a URL and they're responding to it. They're filling it out. It's anonymous, so that's kind of the default. You don't know who they are, and that's fine. There's responses, and so and I put in for this survey, multiple responses are not updatable, which I believe means that you can't come back and change your answers after you've closed the survey. There's a pull-down menu, and there are other options. We'll talk about those in a little bit. IP address range, user group restrictions, AD user group restrictions. These are configurations that I haven't really had a need for, and neither for these others as well. But there's lots of things that you can tweak within the Access tab. Let me move on and go over to the Completion tab. Actually, let me step back and actually pull down that tab that was for the authentication. Single response updatable, single response not updatable. So a number of things that are not intuitive at all about what they're talking about. And so I should point out over here, you see over here on the far left menu, the question mark in the blue circle with the page help. That's always there. Click on that and it will open a little page like this with the relevant information. There's login, the anonymous, which we talked about. There's 2 options with anonymous. There's this force anonymous, which is even more anonymous than anonymous. And then there's these other ones, single response, login required, updatable. So if you want to have a survey, for instance, that only a few people can get into and there's a login that they have to use to get into it, well then you can make that happen by clicking this option. And so it explains what those options are there too. So keep the help in mind as you move along. Now let me go over to the next tab in the line, Completion. In Completion, you'll see these sorts of options. which honestly I don't really mess around with very much. There's a little bit of text here that says thank you for taking the survey. If you want to add that, that's in the next. That will be in the page after they click that they saved or completed the survey. They'll see a message and they'll get that message that we put there. You can make it complex and you can refine the look. You can put links and all those sorts of things that you see there on that menu. Now this next tab is where we can get to some interesting and useful information because it's the report tab. And it shows us the options that we have for when we see the reports. In the reports that are generated for you, you have the choice of pie charts or bar graphs. And as you can see here, I've chosen bar graphs. You can also have the results available only to you, which is high security, to the owners only. And so you identify the owners of the survey back on the General tab in the Options page. Or you can have it available to pretty much anyone. And generally, just for my own use, I just keep it on just for the owners. And if I want to send someone the results, I can add them in as a user, or I can collect the data into a report, and then I'll send them a link to the report. Let's go back to the main tab. So we've been through the design, we've been through options. Let's go down to deploy. Deploy essentially is the information that you need to distribute the survey. The one that's probably most useful is the first one, which is the email link. So you copy this URL, paste it into the email that you'll send to participants, and then they can follow it. There's other things that you can do. You can drag this text in the second box and post that in into a web page, and then something like a web page or a pop-up will come out, and you can use that. And there's a pop-up survey invitation. I guess that's the pop-up. For my own self, I haven't really found that I've needed to post things on a website or anything other than an email link, so I've gone with the basics here of just using the email link. Now you can also input email addresses. That's first option up there, send survey invitations by email. You can put emails into the system, and the system will send it. But it's a level of complexity that I usually don't think that is necessary, and so I just type the list in my regular email and then copy in the link. I don't need to have everything self-contained within the UW survey tool, although you sure could if you wanted to. Now let's go back here to the main menu. And so we've looked at a fair number of things. We've walked through the options over here: design, options, deploy, analyze. We haven't gone into any depth into analyze, and I think we will later. Create new survey over here on the left-hand side. You've seen that you can look at the templates over here on the top bar. And then you can also edit your email lists and also get your reports up there. But this working area that's down here, in this main area, is where you'll spend most of your time. Now I haven't mentioned over here on the left side of this working area that there's a column called Manage, and so this tells you what's happening with the surveys, whether they're open for people to take or not. And so these surveys are open, some surveys are closed, and so if you click on close, you see here in the status, if it's open, I can click on close and it will close the survey and people won't be able to take it. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't take a look at the options, particularly that date that the survey is not available anymore. An open survey can still not be takeable by someone. This close has to do more with, I think, how it resides within the system, rather than can the public access it. So that date that we typed into the close date on the options, that's the date that you want to make sure that's open. You should always, of course, test your own survey to make sure that it is actually as open as you think of it. You can also archive the survey over here, the little floppy disk image, and then once a survey is archived, then you can delete it. It's not easy to delete these things in this working area, thankfully. Let's click on the results. So I've clicked on results, and it shows me how it shows me the results. It shows me what's been collected. And so I've clicked for the tour a couple of years ago, and it shows me that 9 respondents responded. There was 9 total. The date that it was launched, the date that I closed it, which page I'm displaying. And of course, in this survey, there were only the 4 questions on the one page, so they're all displayed on one page. And then it displays the results in a summary form, just a little table here, just the number of responses. Those were all comments questions, so it will actually show me the comments when I click the View tab. It doesn't just all put them on one page. But it does show me the results of number 4, since that was a ratings thing. And as you can see here, I had them rate the quality of the tour, and it shows me by bar graph, which is what I had as the option, for how they rated it, and then it calculates the percentage as well. I didn't assign any points. You may have noticed that was one of the options in the options for setting up the survey. You could, or setting up the question, you could, like if you wanted to say not worth the time was like 1 point or 10 points or something like that, you could accumulate a score, an overall score for yourself. Or if this was a test, let's say you wanted to assess knowledge of participants and whether they learned anything, well then you could assign points to the questions as you go along. I didn't, so that's not applicable, and so it doesn't calculate an average either. Now, if you did click on View, that's when you would see you could see the results for the comments as well. Now you can export these results if you want into a spreadsheet, and then you can do more things with them. But for my own use, what I did here was enough. So let me step back a little bit and talk about using the online survey tool, and then we can answer questions about the survey tool, and then perhaps try to get into the system itself. So using an online survey tool is essentially like taking or setting up any other sort of evaluation. You want to be very clear. Specifically, you don't want to have people guess at what you meant. You want to make sure that your questions were clear and that the answer that you're hoping to get for them is clear too, that the options themselves make sense. So it helps to do some pre-testing, because what may be clear to us as people who set up the survey may not be clear to someone who isn't within our system or doesn't come at it with the same perspective. Second part of that is be specific. We want to have participants respond to things that are pretty concrete. So general concepts, it may be helpful to ask maybe 1 or 2 questions that are just generally about the program, but we want them to be we want to get more concrete results out of it. Let's say we're receiving a survey about customer service at a restaurant, for instance. A general concept was, how was the customer service at the meal at the restaurant? And you could speak good or bad or a rating scale or something like that. That's all right. You can get the scale. But let's say let's say that the owner of the restaurant was particularly interested in different points of customer service. For instance, did the waitress or waiter ask you whether you wanted dessert, or whether they got your drinks promptly, or whether your service was generally good? That would be the sort of specificity that would really provide us as users people who use evaluation information, the sort of things that would really help us improve the quality of our presentations and our workshops and whatever it may be. Or if we're getting perspective from the community on some sort of community event or some sort of community issue, then we want to be very specific, just exactly why they didn't like something. This is why the third one is helpful. The third point is helpful too. Ask multiple questions. And it's easier for us in a couple of ways. It's easier for us as users because we can break down our analysis into more refined points. And it's also easier on the user because it's not big chunks all together. It's smaller bites. Now, of course, we don't want to ask too many questions about things that the user is not going to find very interesting. When you go to a store and you fill out and you see on the receipt that you have the option to fill out a survey. Well, you don't want to spend 10 minutes taking a survey. So we have to be conscious ourselves of what we're asking our participants to be responding to. And then, as I mentioned before, you definitely want to test the survey. Test it yourself on your own computer. You might send it to a colleague and test it on their computer. Test it on different systems. Connectivity is an issue. Different web browsers perhaps may be an issue. You never really quite know. But that's why it's helpful to have a couple of tests, and also that it sorts out some of those things about being clear, being specific, asking them multiple questions. Did we do a good job of setting up the survey to begin? Let me go and talk now just about some more broad evaluation information. Of course, when we have the need to get information from a group, we have a lot of options. A survey is just one of the options. An interview is an easy one. We can walk around an event, or we can pull someone in or go to someone and talk to them about a specific issue. An interview is an easy way. I guess you'd say it's a straightforward way. It's not an easy way because you're only doing one person at a time. You might be able to get good depth, but it's a fantastic investment in time. We've been trained on focus groups a couple of years ago. Focus groups are a really helpful way to go about gathering information on a specific issue, sort of a facilitated discussion. You definitely do need to have people all there, all in one group. I saw a focus group not long ago in which there were several people in a room, and then they Skyped in one person, and then who had video and audio, and then they had another person on the teleconference, just a phone, just the audio, and it was not nearly so effective for those two people who were not present in the room. So actually talking to people in a group setting, a focus group. Survey is what we've been talking about here for the online survey, certainly, but you can do what we traditionally do, the pen and paper evaluations or question and answers. Clickers, all of our offices have clicker systems, which are pretty good. Another good way to collect data. If you can think of a good question, there's a good way to get the information. You can do a group setting. Let's say the online we've talked about a lot. Polls also. I should say, if you've gotten a poll for to find a meeting time within our issue teams, well, then we probably did the online polls. The survey is a little bit more in depth. And then, of course, the group setting, let's say we do have like a community meeting of 50 or 100 people, then that's a different type of a thing. But we can ask questions, have a show of hands, take public comments. It takes it to another level. And then tests. Pre and post would be an obvious one, or tests at the end, just a post test. They could be online. They could be a survey. But we do need to be thinking about what were those points that were in our program that we wanted to have evaluation. And so a test is an obvious way to make sure that we are actually achieving our goals. Now, with an online survey, like any other survey, we have a number of things to deal with. At the event, we could do it right at the event, in which case a pen and paper survey or an interview might be better. Between sessions, if we have our multi-session event, we know that the more times we contact someone, the more times we spend in front of them, the more times that the more length of time that we have for interaction, the better quality results we'll have. But you may want to test how things are going between those multi-session programs. Of course, immediately after, let's say 3 or 5 days after, or well after, did they actually add in behaviors to their lifestyle well after, 3 to 6 months or a year or even more later. Now let's talk a little bit more about online surveys. We've been profiling the UW survey tool, survey.uwyo.edu, but there's others. SurveyMonkey is a well-known one. If you are building stuff within the Moodle system, it has its own evaluatory system. Of course, you could combine systems like a UW survey tool along with something that's delivered via Moodle. Another online survey system that I found is Fluid Surveys. Chris, I see you've written a question. Can we use the UW system to analyze paper evaluations? Well, certainly, but it just require that someone input all of the data into the system. And I know that for our conference, our regular consumer issues conference that we have here on campus every fall, we try to make it as easy as possible for people to complete evaluations, which means we have the electronic survey, which we email people if we have their email addresses. And when you register, we do ask them for their email address. But we also have hard copy evaluations in every room, particularly for each of the individual concurrent sessions. And then to make this all easy to assess, someone, which is an employee, perhaps a student employee, goes and enters that information. And you've just got to make a decision for yourself about, is it worth your time or an assistant's time to input that information into the system. It is nice once it's in the system because it stays in the system and you don't get lost and it's all consistent. You don't have to do a lot of adding numbers together from the electronic system with the paper system. Perhaps even information you collected with the clicker system. You don't try to have to merge those into a spreadsheet or an online evaluation like this, and it's just then you don't lose them. And I didn't say, but this is certainly free. There's no cost. Now you can also get SurveyMonkey. There's a free level. And if you don't have a high volume of surveys, I don't remember what the minimum is, then SurveyMonkey is free. But if you do the higher levels, then you can get more options, more powerful options for collecting information, more powerful options for evaluating the information. And a downside, though, is once you stop paying for it, then those things may perhaps be lost. The UW system, I suspect it will be around for a while. And even if it weren't around for a while, you could export the information out of the system and into its spreadsheet. Tina's got a question. Have you had much success in getting good response from people in using online surveys? Well, that's one of the issues, isn't it? Connectivity is an issue here. Sometimes people just are not very well connected, or they're intermittently connected, so that's an issue. On campus, I think they tend to like pen and paper, like for our consumer issues conference. But on the other hand, if it's a fairly small group and I'm pretty well connected to the people in the group, let's say we did an Annie's project or a beginning farmer project someplace, I can usually get a high response rate out of them, primarily because I know them and I'm probably in contact with them regularly. I can do some things to increase the connection with them to me and their likelihood to respond. So I don't know generally whether it's better or worse. If you do have a fair number of people, let's say you are doing something community-wide, it probably is good. But you do have to judge the audience, certainly. Now, there's other considerations as well, which I mentioned here on this slide. Offline, can you take the surveys offline or via a mobile device or a tablet device? I haven't tested the UW survey tool on those sorts of things, so I would be suspicious about how effective it would be. But if people are sitting at their computer, then it's really good. Branding is something I mentioned in here because you can add in our logo or logos of partners or things like that, or change the color scheme a little bit and make it a little bit more personal to our organization or whatever organization or issue that we're working with. And then, of course, we do have to be conscious of data analysis. The data analysis within the UW survey tool is pretty shallow. If you want to calculate an average of points or something like that, then it's fine. But if you wanted to do something more complex, and I'm not even entirely sure what more complex might be, then you might want to actually pay for SurveyMonkey for a year or something like that and do some of those higher level options. But for most of our evaluation needs, the UW survey tool has been perfectly fine for me. And then you can actually shorten the URL. Those sometimes we see people when they have them, like on our media releases and things, there'll be a very extremely short URL. Well, you can reference the URL that you got with your UW survey tool so that people don't have to have a complex URL that they're typing into their system, something that's prone to errors. Now, I see, honestly, we spend quite a bit of time talking about the survey tool. Are there questions that you have on it? Because I don't think that we'll have a time to actually go into the system. you can certainly create a pre and post evaluation. It would essentially be creating two surveys within the UW system, and then you would modify the first survey. You could create mirror images of the same survey if you just wanted to test the same sort of information, or you could modify the information as you want. Now, I've opened up the survey tool within the link system, and you should be seeing my survey. So I've been editing the questions. I'm going to click Done up here. Oops, it logged me out. Oops, it's a little trickier than I thought. Now we're in the system. Here I'm clicking on designing the 2013 survey. I'm going to edit some text perhaps. What did you like about this year's tour? I can't think of anything to change actually at the moment, so I'll skip that. These questions certainly need some modifying. Let's see here. I'm going to edit number 3. It seemed like most people found out about the tour from something in the boomerang. Well, here I'm going to say from word of mouth, which is honestly the one that works the best for me in many respects, but I have to do some paid advertising, otherwise how will people know to share it with other people? And I want to know, and I'm trying to identify who key players are in the local foods area here, or in Laramie. So I want a name. Say, who did you hear it from? And I want them to actually put in that name. So there's question number 3 has been modified, and now I'm asking them, who did they hear it from? I'm done. Actually, let me go back a little bit. I'll go over here to launch. So that should be open. I'll check the options here to see that it certainly is open, but my survey is not going to be, my event isn't going to be until September, so I'm going to keep the survey open until December. And there we go. It's pretty straightforward. Any questions? It looks like you answered your questions. In that case, thank you very much for coming to this presentation. This is a presentation, like we should have said before, through Epsilon Sigma Phi. We're the Extension Educators organization, which is open to all extension educators, no matter their academic specialty or what particular projects they're working on. And of course, we're interested in helping the extension educators be better educators, which is why we put together this sort of presentation. So Tina, we'll probably have more. You've just had one presentation, one webinar. We'll probably have more in the future, and we'll be hopeful that you share it with your colleagues. So thank you, and have a good morning.